Hi, everyone. Greetings, greetings, greetings. And thank you for joining me as I wait for everyone to come in. I want to thank you guys for joining Turning a Moment into a Movement. We come here every Friday at 6 p.m. to talk about wrongful incarceration. The movement began for me the day my son was wrongfully incarcerated for a crime he didn't do. And from that day, I have been taking that moment and building a movement. So thank you for joining me. I want to say hello to Pamela White. Hi, thank you for joining us. And also, hi, Bernice, welcome. And hi, Tia.
Hi.
How are you this evening?
I'm wonderful, wonderful.
Great. So I was just doing the intro and I was just welcoming everyone for joining us. Unfortunately, Trisha won't be with us today. She's under the weather. So we're praying for her and she needs to rest.
Yeah.
She's always out here hard, working very hard. Hi, Yolanda. And so we're going to send her some love and prayers and some positive vibrations.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was introducing myself. I'm J Love for those if this is your first time. And welcome. Tia, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Reverend Tia Littlejohn. So excited to be here. Thank you, J Love. And just very passionate about wrongful incarcerations, about setting things right, about the systemic racism that occurs throughout all of our American life, and continuously praying that we can remain focused on what we want to see intentionally happen in our communities. And I am knowing that as we continue to have the conversation and connect with people all around the globe, that we will and we are seeing change right now. So I just really appreciate being able to be on this platform.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move forward because I know everybody else will be coming in soon. Today, about junk science and forensic fraud that leads to wrongful incarceration. And I want to say that it happens more often than we think. We watch these shows, CSI, and all these, and we see how they collect data and everything, but that's not how it works. So today we want to, give some information about that and have discussions, and hopefully we can educate our community. Greetings, Attorney Hugo Mack.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, I hear you well.
Boy, you know what? With me and some of this technology, it's always a roll of the dice, but I've been hitting good so far. Thank you.
Okay. So introduce yourself to everyone.
Well, first of all, God bless you all, and our leader, J Love. I follow you all the time, and I don't know, Sam Riddle got some competition now. I think you might nose him out, you know what I mean? And so you might be a guest on his show soon. I mean, he might be a guest on your show soon.
Right.
It's very impressive, and God bless you for your spirit, J Love, really. God bless you for your spirit,
Thank you, yes.
So my name is Hugo Mack, criminal defense attorney, and believer in justice. I heard a man say one time, I can do time, I just can't do injustice. So when you fight for the rights of the wrongfully convicted, we're fighting for all of our rights, because it could be any of us. It has been me. So I understand quite well. So I'm just a man staying in my lane trying to do the right thing, J Love. Proud to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy you're here too. And next is Baraka Edward Sanders. Hi.
Hey, how you guys doing? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm great. Introduce yourself to everyone. Let us know what it is you do and who you are and all that good stuff.
Well, my name is Edward Sanders. I am what they call, and I'm still debating on how to call myself, but I'm what they describe as a returning citizen. Maybe I can drop that title. It's been about maybe 3.5 years since I've been home. I spent 43 years in Michigan adult prisons as a child. I entered in prison at the age of 17, came home just before my 60th birthday. Since then, I have recently graduated this winter from the Michigan School of Social Work, which is a master's program. In prison, I took in pretty much acted as a jailhouse attorney. I'm presently employed at the University of Michigan School of Information as a research assistant. I'm working on 2 different projects as a consultant and researcher. And I'm a former intern at the Detroit Justice Center.
Oh, okay. Wow. Impressive. Thank you for, being here with us. I heard the saying, and I feel that it's true, that the ones that's closest to the problem is the closest to the solution. So I'm so grateful that you're here. And we're going to get started with today's event, Junk Science. As usual, Attorney Hugo Mack, we're going to allow you to explain to us what that is and how it can lead to a wrongful conviction.
Well, first of all, it's a great topic, and just a little bit of history, and I'm sure everybody knows this. This issue of junk science is nothing new, all right? Through antiquity, we have been plagued with it, and innocent people have paid a price, and it far eclipses the exposure that Black people have had. You see, in antiquity, we know that many a woman was put to death for not giving the king a son, a male heir, okay? And science at the time said the woman determined the gender of the child. So that was junk science, all right? Which cost people their lives, okay? Because we all know so much better now, all right? And junk science, remember, the earth was flat. To be able to say the earth was not flat and round subjected you to death, okay? That was junk science. So fast forwarding now to the experience of Black folks. Anatomically, Black folks tend to have a thicker mandible than whites, okay? And that's just a fact. That was used to legitimize Black people being closely related to apes than human beings. And so if you can dehumanize me and make me less than a human, then you've legitimized not treating me as a human. So you can subjugate me, you can take away my rights, you can discriminate against me, you can imprison me. What I'm saying is, I'm sorry, ma'am. Hello?
You good? I can hear
Hello?
you.
Yeah, I'm here.
We can
Yeah,
hear
I'm
here.
sorry. I thought I was filibustering. So
No, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is junk science has historically been used in America predominantly against Black and brown peoples, all right? Predominantly. When we had the Salem witch trials in the 1600s, 1700s in this nation, science said you could not drown a witch in standing water. Mm-hmm. So if you accused a woman of witchcraft or a man of being a warlock, what they did is they weighted him down with stones, threw them in a pond for a half hour. If you pulled them out and they was alive, that proved they was a witch. If they drowned, it proved they was innocent. So what I'm saying is that junk science, particularly when it comes to poor and disadvantaged people, is nothing new. So the problem that we've had with junk science is that it has been used as gospel in the courtroom. I've seen cases where fingerprint experts, for example, have been wrong with the interpretation of a swirl in a groove. You know, that is not a science. Fingerprints are not a science. It's an art. There's a big difference. Okay. You know, and we know facial recognition. That is not a science. That's an art, you see, and a flawed art at that. So the problem that we have with junk science is it takes away the possibility of error, because people are trained to believe science cannot be wrong, science cannot lie, but science can be misinterpreted, misapplied all the time. And let's not start talking about DNA. I'll be on here for another 20 minutes. So that's how junk science has been used against us. And that's why we've got to be vigilant, particularly when it comes to like facial recognition. All right. That is another form of junk science, in my opinion. Okay. So it's been used devastatingly against us. No question about it.
Right. Baraka.
And I appreciate Max, and I'm more easy to say Mac than I am Hugo. I lived off Mac Avenue at one time. we should use that on your shingle though, Mac Avenue. But in any case,
all right.
I appreciate the associations with science with the Western world, the way Mac took and went through and articulated that, because this is the genesis of science in the Americas. It has been junk science. I spent, as well as myself, as well as more than 25 other children in this country, we were sentenced as adults under junk science. They took and said that our minds were fixed in that state, and that whoever we were at 14 or 15 years old, that's who we will be at 20, 30, 40, or 50 or 60 years old. So if the child committed offense at that age, there was no taking and reforming that child. And so there was a mandatory sentence that's applied to adults once you were convicted for a first-degree murder, and they put over 2,500 children in this nation inside of this country's prisons. Some of these children were put on death row, and some of the children that was put on death row were even retarded. Okay, so a lot of us, we've been celebrating Brian Stevenson in the movie Just Mercy, and the emphasis in that movie was on one individual. But if you go into his book, he talks about his work, his labor in regards of the cases that he advocated on behalf of children in this nation. The cases that were won by him. Okay, there's over 4 or 5 cases, major cases that he won before the United States Supreme Court, which is a very remarkable task. Most attorneys never go before the United States Supreme Court their entire career. Okay, they can practice law for 40 or 50 years and never appear before the United States Supreme Court. This man has appeared before the United States Supreme Court dozens of times, and he has won as many times he done went up there. He has won, and he has where his name isn't on the paper. He have took and walk other attorneys before this court, and he have challenged this pseudoscience of children being pretty much miniature adults. This is what this so-called weak science was, and it came from a person that was a professor, at a major U.S. university. But just forget about the fact that all of the previous presidents of that university were all former slave owners. Don't pay that no mind, though. But this junk science, even the president that we have right now today, that's where we have to be careful. The criminal legislation, the bill that he talked about, criminal reform, that it was his bill. It included that legislation that incarcerated children. Okay, he needs to make some amends on that, not just apologies, but to make sure that the remainder children, only 700 of them came home since the U.S. Supreme Court decision. He needs to make sure that the rest of them come home as well. 700 out of over 2,500 has come home, and that's not enough. The science has been debunked, not in one case, not in two cases, not in three cases, but repetitively. So Donald Trump ain't the only one that don't get the message. Okay, Kim Worthy and many other prosecutors here in the state of Michigan and many other states throughout the United States haven't gotten the message yet. Okay, that junk science has been debunked.
All right, we're gonna go, before I come to you, Tia, we're gonna go to this video.
Okay.
Just 1 second.
Juries for decades about how you can definitively determine that a fire was intentionally set was completely wrong. In fact, signs that indicated to investigators that they were dealing with arson, crazed glass, alligator patterns, burn marks indicating drips or puddles of accelerant, were actually the same things left in the wake of an accidental fire.
So that video was pertaining to arson, people being incarcerated off of the junk science of arson. Tia.
Yeah, I was going to add, you know, the thing about the junk science is that the terminology that they use today in court is sound science. Mm-hmm. And they try to make it appear as if we have sound science. So even with in reference to the clip, if you're in court and they say this is sound science, you know, people who are the jury are looking and saying that this is science that has evidence. It's measurable. You know, that's what they're thinking. But in actuality, the junk science is not credible. It's not credible at all. And like the two gentlemen have already spoken, it's just too much of it where we haven't been able to go to the prosecutors and say, look, this is not, it's not true. It's not true. Even when it came to Gerard, you know, they went strictly by facial identification, and it wasn't true. But yet you have other science to prove that it wasn't true, whether it's a person's medical condition. You have other science that is factual. And even like with the clip you just showed, there's other science stating that this fire could have possibly happened another way. But oftentimes the prosecutor, like we've said before, they want to win. And I think we've got to get beyond the feeling of the win thing. You know, it has to be more than just you winning. How do you judge right?
Right. It's supposed to, the prosecutor's job is justice. Not a win record.
Exactly.
This is a sport. So when we talk about junk science, we're talking about in our communities where people can barely afford an attorney. They can't afford, you know, specialists to come in, you know, on their behalf. So when you get into these courtroom and the jury sees someone with the, you know, the lab jacket on, or the, you know, the doctoring and all the, you know, letters behind their name, they tend to believe that this is a real source of truth, where it's now being proven that a lot of this stuff is fake and false.
That's right.
I have another clip, you guys.
Yes, I like how those crime shows use modern science to get the bad guy.
Rab's prints are all over Singer's convertible. The pollen that was in Petty Officer Bick's lungs is found only one place on Earth.
People who watch these shows believe that this is how it's really done.
It's not?
It's not.
Former Detective Harry Houck's annoyed that the TV shows make forensic science look infallible.
And you watch a detective get down and look at a body and touch it. Yeah, he's been dead for 3 hours now. He ate dinner 4 hours ago. I can't do that.
On TV, experts identify the killer by his bite mark.
A little 3D magic for clarity, and I give you the killer's incisors.
In real life, experts claim they can identify criminals that way.
Swinton was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in prison based on testimony that bite marks found on the victim were his.
The TV show Cold Case Files covered the trial in which Alfred Swinton was convicted because this so-called bite mark expert said Swinton's teeth matched a bite on the victim.
When the models of the teeth were laid onto the bite mark, it was a perfect match.
The expert explained he's a neutral scientist.
A forensic scientist is not on the side of the prosecution or the defense. We look at the evidence and we make sure that if we're going to make a decision, it's going to be a truthful decision.
The doctor was just wrong. He was just wrong because it's an unreliable technique.
It looks like science.
It does. They're in white lab coats. They sound very authoritative, but they're full of it.
Lawyer Chris Fabricant helped get Swinton freed from jail by doing a DNA test.
New DNA evidence shows he had nothing to do with the 1991 murder of Carla Terry.
Tonight, Alfred Swinton's conviction was vacated, and he's a free man.
That's Chris Fabricant celebrating with Swinton the day he was released.
Bite marks is similar to you and I maybe looking at a cloud, and then I say to you, I say, John, doesn't that cloud look like a rabbit to you? And then you look at it and say, yeah, Chris, I think that does look like a rabbit.
But that kind of junk science puts innocent people in jail. That's 1 or 2 people. Many more people are in jail, and we're supposedly safer because of that.
If you think that maybe even 1% of convicted defendants may have been innocent, we have 2.6 million people in prison today. So we're not talking about a couple of people. We're talking about tens of thousands of people.
But the people who use these techniques, they believe in it. They're confident.
Sure, they're confident. It's faith-based science.
The expert who got Swinton convicted now admits he was wrong. But police still trust bite marks.
Let's say one tooth is missing in the front. So you got to look at that, and you know your suspect's got one tooth missing in the front. That's pretty good. But then again, that's not enough.
Houck says he'd demand other evidence, but not all cops do, especially if experts say they're sure someone's guilty. When they say so, you trust that.
Yes.
But even fingerprint evidence isn't foolproof.
The deadliest terror attack on Europe since World War II.
When terrorists in Madrid killed 193 people, the FBI found this fingerprint on one of the terrorists' bags and matched it to this fingerprint of a man in Oregon.
An international investigation led to Brandon Mayfield.
However,
2 weeks after Mayfield's arrest, Spanish investigators found the man to whom the fingerprint really belonged.
FBI researchers claim fingerprints are right more than 99% of the time, but that still leaves plenty of wrongful convictions. Other techniques are even less accurate. Carpet fiber evidence, gun tracing, hair matching.
Microscopic hair comparison evidence has been admitted by courts for a century.
In one case, it was a dog's hair.
A dog hair was associated wrongfully with the human hair. Since the turn of this century, there have been 75 wrongful convictions.
Fabricant works for the Innocence Project. By using more modern DNA evidence, the project's lawyers have helped free 191 innocent people. All these people were wrongly jailed based on so-called scientific evidence. Why do judges admit this stuff? Why don't defense attorneys get it thrown out?
We all went to law school because we don't know science. We don't know math. And if somebody comes in with a white lab coat and says, I've been accredited by the American Board of Forensic Odontology and I've been practicing for 20 years, that's good enough for government work.
That shouldn't be the standard. Too much is at stake. Jurors tend to believe people who courts call experts. But the experts often rely on junk science. Juries and judges should be much more skeptical.
Okay. So that takes us to, Faulty forensic testimony is one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions in this country. More than 50% of DNA based nationally were exonerated because of wrong forensic and junk science.
Correct. You know, J Love, can I say this one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, part of the problem, you know, DNA has been used to exonerate a lot of people, but even in the taking of DNA, all right, DNA samples can be contaminated, all right, that can throw the result off. And you know, in my years as a public defender, I was mentored by a man named Lloyd Powell. He was the Washington County public defender for decades, all right. And one thing he always grilled into me is the reality of, look, on our best day, we will never be able to give somebody the Cadillac defense that they deserve. On our best day, the best we can hope for is a Chevy, you know, on our best day, because the government simply will not put in resources to put you, me, this brother, this sister here on par with the resources of an O.J. Simpson or Robert Blake. You understand? Beretta, all right? They simply will not do it. The public simply refuses to invest those kinds of dollars because that is a vestige of systemic racism, of systemic sexism, of poverty, that they simply will not invest the money, because it gets to the point where if you don't have the money and resources, you become expendable. And it breaks my heart to say that, but I've seen it time and time and time again, despite my best efforts, and it breaks my heart.
Wow. Tia?
And, you know, along with that is, you know, looking at those scientists who are consistently paid to give a report to back a case. And you got to look at which of these scientists are constantly coming into the courtroom. So there's other motivations sometimes behind that scientist, whoever is giving that valid, supposed to be valid report. So you have the scientist that is being paid for their validation. That begins the whole thing, you know, along with, of course, the prosecuting attorney looking for a certain prediction.
Right. A certain outcome. I know, I want to give this reference for everyone that's watching. The Innocent Files, the Innocent Project did a thing on Netflix called The Innocent Files. And they talk about it. And one of the episodes, there was I can't recall his name, but he was supposed to be the expert in bite marks. And he was used all over the United States for years. And they would get this man to come in, and he would, you know, give his expertise on the bite marks of people. And because of him, so many people was wrongfully incarcerated. And so, you know, now they're disputing his claims of it. And a lot of people who were doing bite marks as experts, they stopped doing it because of it was just showing that the information was wrong. Baraka?
Yes, I think the best protection that we got from faulty evidence of any kind is taking and having a jury of people's peers. That will be the best defense. And that's the thing that's excluded as it relates to African Americans. African Americans are the most widely excluded population in the United States from participating in the jury process. This goes back to taking in where white folks don't trust our view. They don't trust or respect our opinion. And we should find it, if we have never participated in the civil rights movement, the most important civil rights movement that we can participate in as U.S. citizens is to participate in the jury process. And we need to take and become vocal when we see prosecutors excluding African Americans from that process. And they do it in a systematic way. Too often do we have African Americans that take and seek office and they continue to perpetuate the system and practices of their oppressors. This is the case here in Detroit. We had the Detroit Police Crime Lab closed down here in Wayne County as a result of a predominantly African American population taken and continuous in the practices of their oppressors. There's no way that we went in there and used that crime lab in a responsible way would that crime lab have been closed down. We have to take some responsibility too. Okay, we have to quit following the practices of those who preceded us. We have took and went to the streets and protests, and we went to the courts and all these other places arguing for a place. It's not to take his place. It's not to take his place. When you get there, stand there in your own shoes. That's our biggest protection. Now, judges have a responsibility in the courtroom to take and protect, to govern the proceedings. They don't argue the cases. They don't have a duty or responsibility to argue the cases of either parties, but they do have a responsibility to protect the accused from incompetency of his or her attorney, and they have the responsibility to take and make sure that the prosecutor is doing his or her job. Many times judges are bullied by prosecutors, like you see that in recent years with what's the judge name? Bruce Moore. We find that a lot of prosecutors don't care for him. They don't care for him because he tend to be a very fair judge. You know, that's not to say that I know all his faults, that I'm excuse any and everything he does, but they don't like the fact that he does take and insist on some fairness. So they try to bully him. They try to take him to the commission and everything and get him sanctioned. They argue about how he treats the accused and the accused parents as though with some dignity. You know, when they come in his courtroom, he ain't insisting that they be chained up. He ain't insisting that guards take and drag them and pull them all around the courtroom and they make a fuss of it. Okay, but remember, when you stand in pre-trial, you have all the rights of anybody else. You haven't been convicted and sentenced. He's supposed to treat you like that with some dignity. You still retain your rights of innocence until proven guilty.
Right.
Okay? So we need to take and hold each other accountable. And then when those who do stand up, we need to protect them no matter who they are. If Kim Worthy is doing the right thing in her Innocence Project here in Wayne County, if she's doing the right thing, we should stand up and say she's doing the right thing. But if she's doing the wrong thing, we should stand up and say she's doing the wrong thing. We are not giving each other passes because of the color of our skin. We want the right thing to happen. You have in the media right now where the question, for those of you who've been convicted for a result of that breathalyzer, you better pay attention because they just took and determined that that one company screwed their tests. They were lying. And so they're telling the state police and everybody else, do not use that test anymore. So those cases is going to be challenged. You can bet you're going to have organizations like the Detroit Justice Center and others is going to step up to the plate to take and challenge those. And I can't speak for anybody's law firm, but you're gonna take and have you're gonna have some of the activists in our community and others that can afford this endeavor to stand up and make some noise about this. You know, we just had a young man just get out of prison yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, faulty evidence again. Well, in that case, They didn't even have nobody to identify him. They just said it was somebody. They just identified him by his figure and the way he ran. And they said he supposedly told a jailhouse snitch that he done it. And that's what he in jail for. That's what he spent his years in prison for. He went in prison at the age of something like 18 years old, 17 to 18. And the man has spent several decades in prison.
Right. And so, and that's why we have to use our voice. We have, and our, you know, to stand up to some of this, because we can't keep hearing these people coming home after 20 and 30 years and just act like, oh, okay, that's wonderful, and don't demand some kind of justice behind that. Nobody, he's coming home after 26 years of being incarcerated, and there's no accountability. No, nobody's getting in trouble. Nobody's taking responsibility. He's just, you know, okay, you get to come home because, you know, what happened, you know, we didn't figure out after 26 long years that we were wrong.
And it's good that you make mention of this compensation component. The same prosecutors that are taking and pulling these people out, before they done that, they went to the state legislature and made sure that there wouldn't be any compensation. They made it so damn difficult that it doesn't even give attorney an incentive to take and work on these cases and to bring these guys home, because the money is not there. Mm-hmm. The money is not there. You know, if they gave some incentive of real legal representation, you have some very credible and diligent attorneys that would take and put the effort and time in taking and bringing some of these people home. But it's like you're going on a crusade. You go bankrupt trying to uncover some of the BS that they done took and buried people under. We have what's supposed to be a Freedom of Information Act. I can ask for one single paper, one piece of paper from the Detroit Police Department or anybody else. They would take and send me a bill so ridiculous that I'll just leave it alone. And that's their way of skirting, taking and answering the Freedom of Information Act. You know, they'll tell you, okay, you got a bill of $2,500. You put that up first, and then we would take and start preparing a document for you. And they know darn well they're trying to give you everything but what you asked for.
Right. Attorney Hugo Mack, Baraka was talking about the crime lab. Mm-hmm. Could you go into that little, you know, the points of that with the crime lab being shut down? And I mean, there was a case that happened maybe a few years back where there was a crime lab technician, and there was a lot of wrongful incarcerations because of her.
Right. Well, mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. No, absolutely. Rampant problems with the crime lab in Detroit, rampant. And, in the state of Michigan, the lion's share of the work is done by the Michigan State Police Crime Lab. They have a lab in Northville, okay? And I've had several occasions to interface with their technicians, all right? But to their credit, I've subpoenaed a number of their technicians when the prosecutor did not want to subpoena them because, to question them about, what are the protocols of getting certain lab work done? Let me just give you an example of how people can try to defend themselves in terms of crime lab work. Okay, so for example, let's say somebody has got some fingerprint analysis, okay, and they say, we can put the person's fingerprint there. Well, what about searching the scenes for other evidence? I had a case that dealt with a weapon that was supposedly used to harm somebody. I said, but there was blood supposedly there. Did you ever analyze the blood? Well, no, we were never asked to do that. So, if you had been asked to do that, wouldn't you been able to tell us what the blood type was? The allegation is the blood came from the victim. We don't know that now, do we? So what I'm saying is part of what we've got to do is educate the public on exactly what the crime lab does and does not do. Because a lot of people are misled into thinking when the prosecutor has an expert come in from the crime lab, that's the be all to end all. But there's a lot of research, by the way, that every one of you is paying for, by the way. There's a lot of research, technicians, and capabilities that the crime lab has. The prosecutor gets to cherry pick how that evidence is presented. So we've got to start challenging the crime lab on what not only they did, but what they didn't do. So in terms of the technicians, once again, I agree with what the brother said. If you don't have the money and the resources, you will get stonewalled every time. I just want to add on to what the brother said about freedom of information, because he's so right. But not only will they give you an exorbitant bill, they will say under the statutes, the evidence you want, information you want, is exempt. Because it's an ongoing investigation, it's privileged. So the main thing you may need to exonerate yourself, you will most likely never get. Now, you do have the ability to go to court and try to force that issue. But once again, how many laymen have the resources to take the Michigan State Police Crime Lab or the Inkster Police Department, whatever, to court to try to get an in-camera hearing from the judge to see if that information is in fact exempt? So it's an uphill battle, and the only thing we can do is to encourage prosecutors to be ethical, and that's why these prosecutorial elections are so important. They are the gatekeepers. No police officer brings a charge. A prosecutor does that.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
So, that's what we got to do.
And then also with the facial recognition, that's the newest science. We know that science is biased against Black people, and the darker the skin, the more the bias. But we have, and even in Wayne County, there has been maybe 2 or 3 cases so far. I guess they didn't get to court, but people were wrongfully arrested off the facial recognition software. And that's another science. And it could be biased because also the person who is watching the software. Right. So these are things that we as citizens, we have to, when we are celebrating all these different things that they bring before us, we have to make sure that it's working for us in our community.
That's right.
If I may add something here, a lot of us probably don't realize that our right, as it was interpreted to the council, wasn't extended to indigent people, poor people in this country until as late as 1963, GM versus Winwright, which was a watershed U.S. Supreme Court decision that said that not only do we have a right to attorney of our choice, but if you couldn't afford one, that the state had a duty, a responsibility to appoint you one at public expense. Prior to that, people were literally serving life in prison or went on that road without any representation, without anyone representing them. Okay, and I mean, this is as early as 1963. So imagine yourself being drugged before no representation at all. I mean, it's horrific to even think about that, but that is the reality of children when they go before the court with attorneys that have no idea how to babysit. The man or woman went to court for law school, and you throw the child there in the mix. But that wasn't the point that I was trying to make. The point that I am trying to make to build on is that attorneys need to continuously be creative. Law is an art. It's not a science. Law is an art. And our judicial system was built upon taking and hearing human testimony. Attorneys should take and consider to make compelling arguments that prosecutors' evidence that are based upon science shouldn't be allowed in the courtroom for indigent clients. That they that clients cannot afford the evidence to rebut the evidence that the prosecutors are bringing in that is based upon scientific evidence, that the state does not take and put the indigent defendant on the same level as the state. And so in light of that, so that the jury can hear and balance the two contending parties' arguments, they should take and exclude it. The attorneys need to take and start making arguments like that. And they need to take those arguments all the way to the United States Supreme Court. We need to take and have some decisions by the court that deals with the imbalance between these contending parties. You know, it was never intended to cause the average Joe to take and be subjected to the state in the way that states normally take and subject indigent peoples to this adversarial process. And sometimes we can kind of like go down that rabbit hole, and that's what we've been doing. We've been going down the rabbit hole with them arguing about DNA evidence and all other kind of so-called scientific evidence, where the indigent person is going to never win that fight in that rabbit hole. He got to bring his ass back out that rabbit hole, stand on solid ground, and make an argument that this evidence should never be allowed in because I don't have the money to take an argument against the king. Okay, that the king got everybody's tax dollars and he or she can spend it however they want. And I would never be able to measure that. And the courts can take and start saying how much of that will be allowed in, if any. But I haven't seen any arguments that make those kind of compelling arguments. There may be some around, but I haven't seen them. We need to go back to that. The courts once took and said that people who were convicted without attorneys, their convictions were not reliable. Okay, at least for the purpose of supplementing them, etc. And we need to take and start making the same argument about indigent people that go before the court and where the prosecutor comes in with all of this so-called scientific evidence that the poor person cannot take in the amount of defense against.
Yeah. Tia, and then I'm going to introduce you, Alex. Tia.
Yes, I just wanted to pose a question because I know that in behavioral science, which is what I do every day with children, is we've had to look at how well diverse are the people who work with autistic children. And then there's other things that, of course, come into play. Sometimes the child wasn't even really autistic, but sometimes they had a hearing challenge. And sometimes that doesn't come out until later. So the reason why I ask this is because I'm interested in the labs. How well diverse are the people within the crime labs? Because we know science has also shown us that perception plays a lot in the answers or the solutions to a hypothesis. So it's according to a lot of times that person's perception. So I'm wondering, and just to pose it, because I haven't been into the state's crime labs in years, because my grandfather was a police officer, well, actually the inspector out in Ecorse. So I got a chance to go when I was a young girl, but it's been years. But how well, and I know it wasn't well diverse back then, how well diverse are the crime labs?
Attorney Hugo Mack, can you answer that?
Well, great question. Great question. One we may never get an answer to. People have these. And see, another thing. Let me explain this to you too. And I've said this before. Part of the problem we have with police and these governmental agencies are these unions. Okay, are these unions? Because some of these unions will protect and get these collective bargaining agreements where it's so hard to even get information on, for example, a technician on a crime lab, unless you've got some lawsuit that will reveal it. And so just like legislation for us to be able to track bad policemen, a national registry, all right, for people that have been caught in perjury, okay, falsifying records, okay, strong arming, beating people to get confession. So to answer the sister's question, we may never know. I mean, we may never know other than electing a governor, you know, who is going to instruct the state police to be more transparent. And just like the brother said, though, trying to get stuff through freedom of information, I mean, you better be prepared for a long haul with that, okay? In terms of personnel and background and hiring. So the only thing we can do is to, when we get confronted with the issue of the police and the crime lab, you've got to have defense counsel that are not afraid to put that technician on the hot seat. I mean, because especially when it comes to race. Now, you don't know what that technician has heard about that murder case before that blood sample came in. See, you don't know that. You do know most people have access to a television or at least a radio, all right? So don't tell me that because you work at the state police crime lab in Northville, you don't hear about crime. Please don't tell me that. All right, please don't tell me that. So, oh, this is the case of, you know, Rashid Reynolds. Oh yeah, they said he did this. And so that plays in a person's mind. And there's nobody that can lie to you sufficiently enough to say they are so professional that what they hear has absolutely no impact on them. That's a lie. That's a lie. And for jurors, and I can't challenge juries on that all the time, to say that they heard something about the case, but it doesn't have an impact on them. How could it not have an impact on them?
Right. And then you go home and Google everybody. So
that's right.
You're on a jury, and then you go home and you Google the story, you Google the lawyers, you Google everybody, and then you come back with your confirmative biases and try to say, hey, you're going to be unbiased when saying that you're going to be a juror. So
exactly right. That's right.
Hi, Allie.
No.
Welcome. And introduce yourself.
Yes, Alexandria, nickname Allie. I'm with Michigan Liberation, also accountability for Dearborn. And the work I do focuses on, you know, changing the racist policies and procedures in place in specific areas, like Oakland County as well as Dearborn, prosecutorial work, and then also Southfield work as well, and then Dearborn, which is where I work day to day, but also just an all-around activist as well, and help out different areas.
So we're talking about junk science, forensic fraud, and wrongful convictions today. Do you have something that you want to add to this conversation?
Forensic. Well, I mean, for me, I know that kind of thing has been happening for a long time. Forensic fraud, switching of different information just to win a case or just to be convicted. That's been super common. The first thing that came to my mind is Central Park 5 in their case. That was just trying to get people to fill the place, just to fill up just to say they solved the case because it was a hot topic for them. So they just, and it was not, like, that was terrible. So that's one thing that comes to my mind when I think of that. My worry too, like, when you think about regulating these things, how do you regulate something like that? How do you make sure there's no fraud happening? How do you hold those people accountable is the questions I come back to, because with prosecutors, it seems there needs to be so much more detail, and it can't just simply stop at an oversight of them. It needs to go beyond that because they've had power for too long.
Yeah, I feel like we need some kind of fair hiring, where the hiring is balanced, where you have people, when you're talking about, and what Baraka and Attorney Mack was saying, when you have, in our Black communities and other ethnic communities, there is no balance, especially like with the facial recognition. When you don't have any Black people looking at the cameras, identifying Black people, you get wrong results.
That's right.
So we need some kind of practices in place where the hiring of these people that are doing these jobs are balanced. It's more than who shows up in court, that face, but who's running the tests?
Oh, you mean like it needs to be more of a like mental fitness test, like more of a requirement for hiring?
Yeah, but like in the crime labs, who's working in there? You know, it should be a balance of people. It shouldn't be just one type of people. You know, looking at these tests. Who's looking at the facial recognition cameras? I think Rashida brought that up, and a lot of people got mad at her. But who's looking at the cameras? You know, if these cameras are mostly in Detroit right now, who's watching these cameras? Who's identifying the people?
It might be honest, it might be, with the government. I'm just thinking of when I worked at the Michigan Department of Transportation. They, as like student assistant or whatever, a few years ago, they had different cameras that, like, they keep cameras on all the freeways to see what's going on. But then they also have in Detroit, they have like a headquarters where it's just it's a room of just cameras of them surveilling like different areas. So, I have an idea, I guess, of who it's going to, but I guess how do we make that information more transparent instead of it taking for me to work there to find out this, and to know that? It should be more public, more to getting to you immediately. And if those things change, you should be letting you know too, because it's concerning you and how that process is happening. We need to know about that. Like, there's cameras that have misidentified people. It happens all the time. So you can't just let that happen. It's a big deal.
Baraka?
While I was in prison, I mentioned to you that I took and played a jailhouse attorney, and there were individuals whose cases I looked at. There was one gentleman that I'm recalling. We were up in the UP together, and he was convicted for allegedly killing his wife. And the evidence that they had against him, I think he said his wife took and died of an accident, that she fell from the porch or something like that, or committed suicide. But they claimed that he supposed to have hit her before she hit the pavement, and they used some type of scientific evidence about how you would hit on the cement if you were already dead as opposed to if you were living. And it was just junk science to me. But his case, he's going to probably remain in prison to somebody. His case has been on television before. You've seen it on those cases that they present on TV.
I think so, yeah.
And well, I was literally, I locked with this guy. And the evidence in that case, is so terrible. But he eventually is going to get out of prison. But it's a shame that he's going to stay in there and endure that experience. Another case that was horrific that I seen, there was this guy that was he was a former motorcycle gang member or leader, and they were fighting with another motorcycle gang about the colors. One of them was using the colors of the other's gang and so forth. And they went to the place and had some arguments about it. And somebody decided to take and shoot the guy, one of the guys, and they demanded that everybody there take and participate in flicking a wound upon the person. And this one person took and cut the body or stabbed the body after the other person had done shot the person and everything. What the evidence was that they came up with some evidence to say that the person was just some moments from dying, and this wound that this other person inflicted upon the person moments before the person died was enough to take and charge him with first degree. And he was like, if had I not done it, they would have killed me along with the person. And I took it that the person was already dead at that point. He already been shot. They were just wanting everybody to, so when nobody say anything. And he said, so my life was in jeopardy. And so I went along with this. And they come up with some evidence, and I don't know how you can take and determine the moment that the person actually died. They said, well, the person was still living, even though they said that the injury that the person had previously received was enough to kill the person. But this other person that added to it somehow is responsible or added to the death. But it was, I mean, just straight up junk science. And then I had a situation. There was a brother that I was in prison with, and I was working on his case. And as a young lady made mention, I was in my understudy classes in prison at behavioral science. And this guy whose case I was working on, I noticed he had a scar from the front of his head all the way to the back. And so I asked him, how did you get that scar? Now I'm doing paralegal work on this case, but I'm taking classes over in the college and the prison. And he told me that he was in an accident as a child and he went through the windshield of the car. And remind you, this was back in the 60s. Okay, you know how hard the windshields are then, but he went through the windshield. And he said that he was in the hospital for a whole week in a coma. And so he had this open head injury. And I took and told him, let me see your RGC records, because they show all the psychological tests that you take when you come through the RGC. And I noticed that the tests indicated that there was a problem, that he appeared to have a brain damage. And so when I did a little bit more research, the part of his brain that would have been damaged was the part that would require him to deliberate. Okay, so then I took him farther, looked at his records, and I come to find out that the psychiatrist recommended that this person stay in the remedial program, but the psychiatrist said, but he'll never graduate. He'll never proceed beyond a remedial level because he can't retain the information. They say he won't have a recollection. So, but they say it's important that he remain in the program to keep up his self-esteem. So it became apparent to me that this person could not deliberate. If the person cannot deliberate, how do you charge him with first-degree premeditated murder?
Right.
All that became relevant. So when I took and filed a motion on his behalf, I remember I believe he was out of the Grand Rapids area. And I filed a motion on his behalf for newly discovered evidence. I got his medical records and everything from the time he came into prison back in the 60s. This man came into prisons in the 60s before Dr. King was killed. Okay, and here I was arguing his case later in the it was probably in the 97, somewhere around there. And I remember the judge say he ordered the prosecutor to respond, but he said that he would consider appointing the guy attorney, which he never did. He denied the motion, saying it was a bunch of fraudulent information that I put together and sent to him. All of the information came from the prison records.
Wow.
I haven't doctored anything, but that's what, and then I took and referred to it after he made a decision that he never appointed the guy, the attorney that he said he would do. He appointed the attorney afterwards, but the motion been heard and denied. The attorney, he wasn't going to hear, the attorney didn't go back to the court and ask the court to reconsider. He went on up to the appellate court. And Mac know what that means with a 6,500. This is a motion for a 6,500, a false appeal of motion. Most of those motions, over 99.9%, is denied in the trial court level, and it hardly ever took and taken up on the appeal. The appeal court almost always rubber stamp these things. So that's what I'm saying. This stuff is meant for people with money. It's not meant for a per person. If I was an attorney that was representing a reputable attorney in the world, and I had made that same argument, it went somewhere. But I was a person in prison, and I was using the records that any attorney would have used. And I've been trying to find the guy since I've been out, but I haven't found any evidence. I don't know if he died in prison or what, or if he ever got out of prison, but I can't find any evidence of him being there. But the other two cases I mentioned to you, I'm sure them guys gonna get out of prison at some point. This other gentleman, if he haven't already got out of prison, he'll probably die in prison. And it's a shame. He could have never premeditated. And he was convicted for, he wound up taking a plea to second degree, but they should have never charged him with first or second degree. He couldn't premeditate.
Well, so we can, when we're talking about this junk science, we see that in our communities that it would like you said earlier, Attorney Mack and Baraka, you also mentioned it, that we can't afford to fight it. So we end up doing prison time because we can't prove ourselves because of these professionals and because of these so-called experts. Well, you guys, we're over our time. And I want to thank you all for coming in today. This has been a great topic. We didn't even get to even talk about shaken baby syndrome. That's a whole another thing. Maybe we'll come back on another week and talk about just a whole thing about that shaken baby syndrome. So I'm gonna start with Tia. Is there any last things you want to leave with us? Word?
You know, I'm just so grateful that we are having this conversation. And like you said, I know the time is up because there's so much more that we can dive into. And really, I'm looking forward to having the conversation about the reformation around this topic. How do we reform? The training that some of the judges don't even go through. Trainings that even the people who do the scientific evaluations only have 1 week of training in a lot of these areas, and they get certified. So we thank you so much, J Love, for the conversation. We got to keep it going, and we have to make the change happen by first, like our brothers have been restating, we got to be educated. Thank you.
Right. Attorney Hugo Mack.
Well, I want to thank you again, J Love, for the courage to keep speaking, you know, and even when it looked like you're by yourself, but God was with you, and so many other mothers, you know, that have been fighting for their kids, you know. I'm personally touched because, you know, my mother never stopped fighting for me, you know, and God bless a praying mother for us, you know. And I guess I just want to say this. One of the things I hope comes out of these sessions is that somebody will get some knowledge if they're in a situation to confront their attorney with it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
To confront their attorney with it, you know, because I'm gonna tell you, a true dedicated defense attorney wants that interface with their client because they can put themselves in that situation, especially those of us who've been in that situation. Okay. So, you know, we just got to keep speaking truth to power. Okay. Yeah. Truth to power. And, you know, we can take down the bad forensic scientists. Okay. If people are willing to stand up and challenge, you know, and everybody's not going to be set free that should be set free, but you can throw a block for somebody, you know, and make a difference while you're here. So, you know, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to every time we get together.
Yes. Baraka?
You have turned a moment into a movement, and thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to take and come on here and share with you guys whatever relevant information I have. I want to ask you to remind me the next time we come on here, if we're continuously talking about this subject, to mention the issue of inertical firing. Mac, if you can remember that, you remind me too about the inertical firing. This is where a firearm may go off without a trigger pull. Okay, and this is very important. This evidence is hid to protect the gun industry. Okay, one of the single most knowledgeable or recognizable firearms in the United States. The single most recognizable firearm manufacturer has the most dangerous guns in America, and these guns can be fired without a trigger pull. Okay, I've seen the evidence, and I would love to take and share that with you the next time we come on here in inertical firing. And there are cases, you would be surprised how high they stack up.
So because it's so much, we are going to do a part 2 to this next week, for sure. And yeah, we're going to talk about that because oftentimes we see children And a lot of cases in Wayne County lately where children so-called have pulled a gun and shot another kid. And I'm thinking, how do these kids, how do they have the strength to shoot these guns? You know, I am a CPL, holder. And I've been, it took me a minute to get the strength to pull these, guns. So how can an 18-month-old, how can a 3-year-old, how can a 5-year-old shoot off a gun? So I am very interested in that. And so we can have that conversation and talk about that. Thank you. Next week, Allie, anything you'd like to say?
Yes, just grateful to be here. Glad the movement is still going. It needs to always be going. And I'm glad to see that, in various forms. So I really appreciate this. Also want to say to everybody attending and watching, please continue to be involved locally, wherever you're living. Please, go to your city council, go to your mayor. Make sure you're asking those questions and, asking about the information. Why aren't you giving information? Always keep the pressure. Every change that's happened is because of the people. It's not because of those who are there. It's because of the pressures that we put on them. And that has happened time and time again. Right. Also, things people should keep in mind is that we keep us safe and we have to save us. We can't rely on the government to save us. We can't rely on the police to keep us safe. We're past that. We see the data. We know what's happening. So we have to be comfortable with that reality and embrace it. And then last thing, just want to say, in terms of Wayne County, if Kim Worthy can hold Rick Snyder accountable, then she should hold herself accountable too. And that's all.
Oh, that was a mic drop. Okay, I wasn't expecting that one. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And guess what? We are the people. We, like you said, we are our voices. When we stand up, we have the power. We have the power. We just have to understand that and take our power back. And this is why we're coming on every Friday at 6, so we can educate and motivate and inspire people. So we won't have another mother like myself and others who are living the nightmare of wrongful incarceration, who are living the nightmare of over sentencing, their kids being over sentenced, who are living the nightmare of juveniles that are given life and double life. We have to educate ourselves. Like you said, no one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves, and we have to have the conversations, and we have to educate ourselves. And this is why we're here. And although it may be a little uncomfortable, we have to start somewhere. And it's time for us to take responsibility. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We'll see you next week with part 2 of junk science and forensic fraud and wrongful convictions. Have a great week. You guys enjoy the Super Bowl. Oh, and I forgot to say, this is Black History Month.
That's right.
Making history now.
Right. So, and all of this, you're right. We're making history by taking our power back. So
that's right.
Enjoy the Super Bowl, you guys, this weekend. If you guys watching football, and I'll see you next Friday. All right.
Amen.
Bye-bye.
Everybody be safe now.
Bye-bye.
Yes, you too. Bye. Safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I will. Thank you. God bless you, J Love. Thank y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Bless you too.
Thank you.